I have to ask, since this season, um, your family in this series is going through an upheaval. Agnes is no longer the reigning queen of the family, and it's now Ada's turn. So, Cynthia, what's it like for you to play this new dynamic in Agnes and Ada's relationship?
Oh, it is thrilling. I mean, Ada is so used in her life to playing second or even third banana, and to all of a sudden be the head of the household, the person with money, the person with decision-making power, is at once very exhilarating and very heady, but also very scary because the chance to fall on her face in front of the whole household is very great. And she does it a few times.
And for Christine, your character this season is not really feeling having to take a step back. So, like, how is it for her to get used to this new position, um, and just this new dynamic in the family?
Well, I think the fun is watching, for an audience, the fun is watching how hard it is for her. I mean, that was not her identity. Her entire life, she was an authority figure. She was the one in charge. She was the boss. Even when she was a wife, she was the head of the household, and she took care of her sister since her sister was a little girl, and then
Yeah.
made a choice in life to marry a man she didn't love, not only for herself, but to bring her to help her sister along, just because of pure economics. So I can sympathize with Agnes being very disgruntled and disoriented by this. It's hard as a human being when you have patterns that have existed for not just years, but decades, where you have an identity. You have a very fixed identity of your place in the world, which in season one is upended or just discombobulated by the presence of the Russells across the street. But then it comes into my own home where my position is upended, and I think psychologically it's a very big challenge for Agnes, but it makes for great fun between us as actresses, and a lot of a chance for humor in those just little moments of like squabbling, and it's my silver, it's my china, and this sort of sisterly these
Combat.
combat. It's kind of delicious to play.
And to piggyback off of that, like, something that you said about having an identity that gets changed. Like, I know for me, especially as the oldest kid, I feel like a lot of oldest kids have this identity, and when your siblings grow up and things start changing, I know for me personally, I've been like, oh no, what is my identity now? Like, what am I can't help like I used to, or I can't protect like I used to. And so that's something that I identify with a lot.
I think people will identify with this because, well, most people have brothers or sisters, but the sister dynamic is particularly fraught when one sister is doing better than the other sister. It's like, whoa, you know, not a happy situation and having to, and I think poor Ada is aware that not only is she the head of the household, but she's not allowed to do it on her own terms. She's got Agnes looking at her every second, knowing she's being judged.
Mhm.
So, there's that.
Yeah. Um, and to what y'all were saying about playing sisters, like, what's it like to play not just sisters, but just to work with each other because you both have such huge backgrounds in film and television, and what's it like to be scene partners in this series?
Well, we've known each other for a very long time. We worked together first in 1983, where we played mother and daughter at that time. And so I have always, even before I knew Christine, I have admired her so much. And we have a lot of affection between us. And so when I heard that when I was offered this part and I I said, who's going to be Agnes? And they said, well, we're trying to get Christine Baranski. So I texted her right away. And it was part of the wonderfulness of this,
It did make
of
it
this
easier to
project.
just
Yeah.
jump off and assume this intimacy that, I mean, my God, other than a mother-father relationship, that the sibling relationship is so so intense and so complex,
And layered.
multi-layered, and the way we speak to each other and all has to reflect years of speaking that way, you know, and it was made so much easier by the fact that we had this past relationship, and I've seen Cynthia's work, she's seen mine. So we jumped off of this cliff together with holding hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. And I think I have time for one last question, which is for both of you. This series, something that I've always been astounded by is just how much talent there's across the board. Like you have film, TV, actors, and of course Broadway theater. Um, what's it like to work with all these people that have this amount of talent to create this series?
I think that, so many of us have known each other for literally decades, performed together multiple times, or admired each other's work, known each other personally. So that's a delicious treat. Like, we sidle up to the director and you say, who are you going to get for this part? What about so and so? Have you thought about so and so? But for me, the wonderful revelation was the people that I didn't know were the young people who have been so uniformly just so talented and so committed and just so beautiful and just stellar in every way.
And it's an opportunity for like people like Cynthia and I who have so much experience to sort of welcome them and be mentors or help however we can. And that's a beautiful thing too, welcoming them into the profession and wanting to be our best as professional in terms of professional conduct and our artistry to be as good as they may think we are. We all lift each other up in the best way.
This season, your characters are experiencing a bit of turbulence in your relationship. I guess Carrie, I'll start with you. I know that you in this series are like really out for power, and so how is that affecting your relationship with your husband and just how you are sitting in the I guess New York world as a whole?
Well, to be fair, I think George and Bertha share their lust for power. But what happens this season is the way Bertha's going about acquiring that power is in conflict with George's values ultimately. And George really disappoints himself by not standing up for Gladys. And even though it all appears to work out, maybe, but I don't know how we're doing spoilers on this, but Bertha feels confident things are going to work out for Gladys. She thinks she's really doing well by her. And she also realizes that she wants her daughter to have more power and influence than she ever had, but also to have fulfillment and purpose. So it is ultimately grounded in love. And she finds, I think, George's inability to reconcile that really confusing, frankly, because they have shared that ambition.
And for you, Morgan, you're not only dealing with trying to understand where Bertha's coming from, but you're also dealing with JP Morgan. So like, what's it like to, I guess, have this personal story that's happening, but also deal with a historical person in your life as well?
Well, the great joy of dealing with JP Morgan is getting to act with Bill Camp, who is, I think, one of like the great character actors or actors, period, of this moment. So that was really, and also just a joy to be around on set. It was really fun to have him. But yeah, George's career and family life are really kind of being pushed to the limit in this season. Everything, there is a point where if the money doesn't come through, it's over. It all falls apart. And I think you know, Bertha, because of where he and Bertha are over in their dispute over Gladys, Bertha can't be there for him. Bertha's not, he can't really go to her and talk to her about what's happening in his business life. And so he's kind of alone to deal with this increasingly unstable and dangerous situation. And I think that's true of Bertha as well. The two of them find themselves kind of on an island as a lot of what has been consistent in their lives starts to unravel.
So with this season, there's a lot of change, a lot of stuff going on in your family, the Russell's family's life, but there's also just a lot of change in general. And so with what's happening in this season, what can the both of you, I guess, tease or tell the audience about like what they can expect with everything that's happening this season? I guess without spoilers, of course, but and I guess I'll start with Carrie uh, with this one too.
Well, I love that it opens in the wild, wild west.
Mhm.
One of the things that's so thrilling that Julian is trying to bring home is the idea that that westward expansion was happening at the same time these genteel battles for society were happening. And it's wild to consider that this new power was being born in this moment. And to remember those things were happening simultaneously is really, I think, thrilling. And I think we pulled off the visual effects for that too.
Hell yeah.
And so that's really exciting. And I love, we all know that Ada and Agnes have changed fortunes. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of turmoil across the street, and it's to hilarious effect. I so enjoy it. We got to watch the show with an audience, and it was so exciting to see how the audience responded to that moment. And of course, as in episode one, Kelly O'Hara goes through this harrowing moment where she finds out she's going to become a divorced woman potentially. And, you know, the consequences of divorce were much more serious for women back then. So I feel like we're setting up a lot to explore.
I would also say, just piggybacking on starting in the Wild Wild West, I think part of what that's signaling is that I said Wild Wild
You
West,
did, but bring it on, just
like
emphatic.
the movie. Anyway, that was embarrassing. Child of the 90s, what can I say? Starting there, I think it's a signal to the audience that we're going to be doing unexpected things in this season, and I think we really do. I think there's a lot that happens that feels like it's sort of outside the boundaries of what we would have thought of in the previous two seasons as the Gilded Age, what the show, what kinds of things the show does, and I think we kind of come through on that in this third season. We expand the purview of the show a little bit creatively.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I think I have time for one more question. Something that I have noticed throughout the seasons is just how stacked the cast is with not just TV and film talent, but like Broadway and theater talent. And so like what is it like working with this cast and just working with the amount of talented people that there are?
So humbling.
Yeah. You mean that in the real way, like you're working with people who you're just like you're
I mean, even
way better than
like
me.
Celia Keenan Bolger is playing my maid servant, and she just got a lifetime achievement, essentially Tony Award. I mean, she's been active in our community not only as a performer but as an activist and a political activist, and I just so admire her.
She's a death.
And I'm like, and I order her around on my set. It feels a little disingenuous at times.
Yeah, Michael Cerveris too played my butler, and he's
It's extraordinary. Felicia Rashad has joined us, and we just have this murderer's row of actors in our and the Broadway bingo card just gets bigger and bigger. So it's just so much fun for fans, and it's also great for theater actors to have a job. Let's be frank.
yeah. It also really just sets a tone on our set that
Yeah.
it feels like an ensemble. It
Yes.
feels like everybody's kind of in it to tell the story together.
Mhm.
And we really don't have any divas. We don't have
No.
any nonsense, which is impressive given the size of this cast.
Yeah.
First, for Jordan, you're a newcomer to the season, and you're playing a new character. And the both of y'all have a relationship that could be happening this season. So, what could you tell us about what we can expect?
I think you can expect um, to see a new generation of just as we see with the Russells and the Van Ryns, you're going to see a new generation of Black Americans rising and claiming their power.
Mm.
And and deciding for themselves who they want to love and how they want to love. And I mean, I said it to Denée when we were doing ADR. I said it when we were doing, like, she is so easy to fall in love with, that, it's not just physically, not just the eyes, but her intellect and her brain. We're gonna see a man who falls in love with all aspects of this person. Um, yeah, and I'm just excited to share that with everybody.
We get to finally see Peggy like openly giggle and blush. And I think that it sounds like so frivolous, but after seeing so much grief that Peggy's gone through and the weights of what she's moving through in the first and second season, just as a Black femme living through the times we're all living through, I think it's going to be really special to also watch her feel chosen and feel like she's chosen for everything that she is as and what it's like to see her loved for how big her dreams for herself really are. And I think that's sort of radical in its own way.
And to piggyback off of that, you talking about being chosen. I've been thinking about that a lot recently, as particularly when it comes to Black women, Black femmes, what it's like to feel chosen. The idea of like, should we feel chosen, and like, what does that mean?
Hmm.
And so with Peggy, with everything she's gone through, with her finding her purpose in her work and trying to find her place in this very fractured, I mean, it's still a fractured country, but even more fractured country then. How have you dealt with that feeling of like being chosen when the country, society is telling you that you're nothing?
I think one of my favorite things about Peggy is the relentless vision she has for herself. It is almost unwavering, even in the moments that we watch her deal with the unbearable, like losing her child, losing her family for a time, her parents. She's like, yes, but I have a purpose. I have a vision for myself, and I'm going to keep taking the steps towards it. And I think when we watch her walk away from Fortune at the end of last season, I always say she's not walking away, she's walking towards herself. And I think it's beautiful that we see her find the love that she deserves from a place of choosing herself, which sounds so, eat, pray, love, but there's something energetic about it that I do think, because I think about that question too. My therapist asked me about it, like, why is it so important to feel chosen? And I think for Peggy, we keep seeing her make these sacrifices to choose her dreams and choose herself and choose the way she needs to show up. And her eyes light up for the first time when she sees him ask to read her writing. It's something about, oh, he's choosing what I've already chosen in myself. And that's why I can trust this love. And I think that's beautiful.
Hmm. And also with Jordan's character this season, we learned that he is inspired by your dad in the show.
Yeah.
So Jordan, and I guess Denée, you can also answer this too. Like, what's it like to play off of that, to realize that he is inspired from what your family has done and that he understands you on a different level?
Well, I think for Kirkland to have he has this very pure image of Mr. Scott, who is this self-starter. It's the opposite of his mother's image of Mr. Scott, right? Like, he sees a man who overcame slavery, who built a business for himself, who taught himself medicine and homeopathy and opened the door for himself so that people like myself could walk through it and open the next door for the next generation. And I think the love and admiration that he naturally carries for Mr. Scott, he's someone Mr. Scott calls, I'll do anything. And he's never met Peggy. He didn't even know Peggy existed. So to fall in, as Denée said, like, what Dr. Kirkland then falls in love with is this woman's mind, this woman's ideas, her thoughts, the life that she's already created for herself, and her dreams. It's everything that he wants and more in a partner, not just a wife. but someone that he can support and who can challenge him and help him to grow out of his comfort zone. Um, and the natural love and respect that he carries for her father, even though, there's been some tension in their family and such. Dr. Kirkland can see through all of that as well and still make a connection to him because he has everything everything that I am is because of her family.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think in some ways it probably helps Peggy soften to her dad even more and like love him for the ways that what she sees in Dr. Kirkland. I think that it's this special tie. I feel like there was a line that was maybe cut that Peggy goes, "Oh wow, like I didn't know that. Have you ever told my father that?" Used to
Mhm.
be a line in the show
Mhm.
that I thought was really special. Just this little moment of repair even in that love.
Mhm.
Mhm. And I think I have time for one more question, and this is also to both of you. You're both working with some really powerhouse actresses. Felicia Rashad, Audra McDonald, who of course has like just come off of the Tonys. So like, what's it like working with the two of them and having their wisdom uh help you along set?
I mean, we're working with the literal goats, like the greatest of all times. Like both of them hold literal records of Felicia Rashad is still holds the record as the highest rated woman on TV of all time, and the person who held that before her was Diane Carroll. And then Audra is the most Tony nominated performer of all time. And sitting at their feet and the generosity that they move with as artists is incredible. Like I feel like even just through osmosis, I've gotten better. But on top of that, when you ask them questions about their craft and about themselves as humans, they share it with so much generosity that I have gotten to learn things that it's been a masterclass. It's made me better. Acting with John and Audra and Felicia has made me better every time I do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't say it better. It's just a pure and it's also a moment like you said to ask, to be present. If you want to know something, just approach them, but also to build your character off of them too, because they play our parents, and we don't get like it's not like the theater where we get all that rehearsal time or anything. So it's like, all right, let's deep dive into these conversations. And so the conversations that Felicia and I would have regarding my relationship and my feelings toward Peggy Scott and her feelings towards Peggy Scott. And even though you don't see those conversations on camera, all that work and all those conversations show up on the camera because of the time that we all spend off the camera together on the set, learning and existing with one another. They really are they're masters at their crafts. So
Mhm.
they make us look great.
So, Harry, what can you tell us about some of what your character is going through the season? I know that you have a relationship with Marion, and things might be, you know, iffy or whatever, but like, how are things going with you and your family and everything this season?
I think this year he's really coming into his own standing as a man, and that involves not only business ventures himself, who I get to do with the lovely Ben Allers on this
Mm,
exploration with the clock, and then going out to Morenci and him trying to figure out what he has to bring to society and what he has to bring to business as a whole, and also matters of the heart, both like trying to be there for his sister and also and help with her navigation of her matters of the heart and also declare his own love and try to navigate that situation of proposal and complication. And it's a really potent season for Larry to grow up.
And for Taissa, hopefully this is not a spoiler, but like I'll just say it like this, that I know that your character is facing a marriage proposal that is fraught with drama. So like, how is she handling what is coming her way this season?
Gladys is handling it terribly. I mean, to put it bluntly, she's on an emotional roller coaster. And I think at the start of the season, she starts very much on a high and she feels very confident that she's going to be able to um, have her way and choose her own happiness and her own path forward. And by the middle of the season, she is at the complete opposite on the bottom, the lowest she's ever been. And thanks to this marriage proposal, you know. But by the end of the season, I think Gladys she learned something from her mother, which is to take a situation and manipulate it slightly to be able to get the most happiness you can out of it. And by manipulation, I mean it in the way of like, these are the cards you were dealt. You can't change it. You know what I mean? Like, this is what you have in front of you. So what can you do to maximize on that?
Mhm.
Which is something that brings her and Bertha closer together by the end.
And speaking of Bertha, your mom and your dad this season are having a rough time on various levels, and so like, how are y'all as the the kids in the family? Like, how are y'all dealing with what Bertha and George are dealing with, and what could happen with their relationship?
I think we're actually pretty well sheltered from the dispute between Bertha and George. I mean, I feel like,
I think the complication is trickle down though.
yeah,
It is very to do with their relationship to us and
yeah,
how George and Bertha are treating Larry and Gladys,
yeah.
and that's almost exactly what they're splitting or they're going through
The
dissonance
difficulties,
about.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think we're both involved a lot in the complication and have
In
our own
therapy.
judgment, and it's causing a fracture in the whole family. The whole thing's going. This very powerful unit is
Yeah,
getting split up in a different way, and it's a really
yeah.
beautiful
I,
exploration
I
of that.
think Larry's a bit more aware of it just in terms of Gladys starting from episode two, end of two, she sort of locks herself in a room for a few episodes and she's really just wallowing in her own stress and grief. So I think she obviously has an inkling of what's going on, but I don't think she gets to see much of the distress between the parents because then also Gladys takes a bit of a trip later in the seasons.
Mhm.
Um, I think Gladys is a bit caught off guard by it at the end.
Mhm. There's also with the Russells, we have JP Morgan coming into the situation, and while that has to do more with George, like, what's it like in a show like this, uh, mixing in the fiction with the real life and like learning about history as you take on these different chapters in your characters' lives?
I think the fact that these characters are amalgamations of different real characters and they are somewhat fictional uh, is is interesting because they're also in a very real context. And I think for anyone in New York, you can still feel this history here
Mhm.
and in the buildings, in the way that the city is constructed, in the way that we move through it. And I think that's what I find really interesting is that there's this interweaving between fact and fiction that allows for this really deep exploration of morality and reality and social standing and love and chaos, and it's
I think it's beautiful to be able to mix like audiences love the show because it's drama. You know, you get to
Mhm.
focus on something else other than your own problems, and it's in such an opulent, beautiful world. Like visually, it's a feast. You know, we know
Mhm.
what we're gonna get with this show, but it's that beautiful mix of like cotton candy for the brain as well as history books. The mix of that is I think why audiences respond so well to it. We get to learn about even the history that we didn't get to learn in school about the black wealthy families in Brooklyn that I definitely had not learned about before I sat down with Erica Dunbar on this show. And I think it's just for us, it's just a beautiful excuse to pick up those books and read and learn more and then share what we've learned with the rest of the world.
What has it been like to be a part of this series that has brought new elements of history and representation to period dramas?
I think you just said it. When we see Black characters in the context of that 1880s, that period after the Civil War, it's always the stories that we see are always told about slavery, about um, sharecropping, Jim Crow, and there's a whole part of our history that's been erased. And so there was a Black middle class, there was a Black elite. Um, the Great Migration hadn't started quite yet, but there were people who were migrating up north. And then there were also people who had lived their entire lives being free. Um, and so within the scope of the show, we are now expanding this Black elite world to Newport, Rhode Island. And what we learned from the historians, and specifically from Dr. Erica Dunbar, was that there was a Black elite in Newport, Rhode Island. And we all know how tiny Newport is, how tiny Rhode Island is in Newport. And what was interesting about Newport at that time is that because it was so small, there were Black residents and white residents who lived in close proximity to each other. The schools were integrated. Brian Stokes Mitchell's character is inspired by a real man who was pastor of a prominent Black church and then also held some sort of political office. I can't remember exactly, but he was inspired by a real person. And so these people did exist. Their stories have been erased, and now we get the chance to tell them. And I think it's incredible for the viewers. It's incredible for me as a student of history to learn about my own history that is basically erased.
And I read how some of your own experiences and even your family history has been part of the influence of this show. What's it like to be able to like draw from your own life and your own family to be able to craft these characters?
Well, I think part of it was that, again, knowing some of my family history and knowing our family stories, I didn't see them represented on screen. And so my great grandfather, he started a school for Black children called the Warfield School. And all of his children were educated because they lived in Guthrie, I think it was Guthrie, Kentucky, but the nearest school, high school for Black students was in Tennessee. And so if you grew up in that area and you were Black, you couldn't go to high school. Your education ended at eighth grade. But
Mhm.
my grandfather worked for the railroad. And so he was able to get all of his children who had to take a train to and from high school every day. They all had a high school education, high school diplomas. Um, and so that changes a generation and generations to come. And I didn't see a reflection of my history, of the history I know of other people of color on television, in film, in relation to this time. And so it's a really an honor and a privilege and a joy to bring it to fruition here on screen.
One thing that I've always wanted to know is like, as you know, a fan of Downton Abbey, like Julian Fellows, is like I guess almost like the new king of these kind of shows, and so it's just like, was it like working with him and melding like a meeting of the minds? Like, was it like writing the show together and um I don't know, I guess picking each other's brains?
It's really like nothing I've ever done. I mean, writing is really intimate business, and I thoroughly enjoy writing and working with Julian. I think I'm uniquely qualified to do this job and to work with Julian because of just sort of some things in my background. I went to this private girls' school and I had a very classical education and I was a debutante. And I
Mhm.
come from a Black elite family in northeastern Ohio, Cleveland, in fact, where John D. Rockefeller grew up for part of his life. And so this was not an unfamiliar world to me. I mean,
Mhm.
I watched a lot of documentaries on the Vanderbilts, but one of my favorite authors is Edith Wharton.
Mhm.
And I just I loved reading Edith Wharton novels. And so I think Julian and I, we just there there was something, you know, between us that we bonded and it worked out. And I also spent time in England writing with him. And so I spent a lot of time with him and he created the show. And part of, one's job as a writer is to write with one voice. It's two different people writing it, but to write with one voice. And just the more I got to know Julian and know his voice and spend time with him, I think that really helped our process. And so we have a really quick process too. I mean, it's faster, but if I'm there in England visiting, him, we'll talk over breakfast about something and work that whole episode out.
Mhm. And I think I have time for one last question. Just as a quick teaser for the folks who'll be reading this, or watching this rather, uh, what can you tease about the season that uh people might not expect, or that you think might be a surprise for people this season?
I think the power shift um, in the households is interesting dynamic that we play with, and yeah, the I think of this season as coupling and uncoupling as well. So it's about relationships. So I think there are couples who we will see get together, and there are couples who will fall apart, and you just get to watch and see who does what.